Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Perfect Masks. Blake Garrison had always prided himself on reading people. 20 years in military intelligence, followed by a decade running his private security consulting firm, had taught him to spot deception from a mile away. Yet somehow he had missed the most important lie of his life, the one being told by his wife of 12 years. Ashley Garrison moved through their pristine suburban home like a ghost haunting her own life. Blake watched her from his home office doorway as she prepared dinner, her blonde hair catching the evening light. She wore the same distant expression that had become her default over the past 6 months. "How was your book club meeting?" Blake asked, stepping into the kitchen. Ashley's knife paused mid-chop against the cutting board. "Fine. We discussed that romance novel everyone's been raving about." She didn't look up. Very passionate. Blake studied her profile. Ashley had never been a good liar, but lately, her tells had become more subtle. The slight tension in her shoulders, the way she avoided eye contact, the manufactured casualness in her voice. Which one was that again? You would know it. She swept the diced onions into the pan with unnecessary force. "It's not really your type of thing." Blake's phone buzzed with a text from his business partner, Tommy Reeves. Client dinner ran late. "Rain check on drinks?" "Tommy's canceling tonight," Blake said, watching Ashley's reflection in the kitchen window. Her shoulders relaxed almost imperceptibly. "Guess I'll be home after all." This time, Ashley did turn around, and Blake caught something flickering across her face. Disappointment? Fear? It was gone too quickly to be sure. "That's nice, honey. We can watch that documentary you wanted to see." Her smile was bright and empty, like a billboard advertisement. Blake had built his career on understanding human nature. In Kandahar, that skill had kept his unit alive. In civilian life, it had made him wealthy. But standing in his own kitchen, watching his wife perform happiness, he felt like an amateur. Their marriage hadn't always been this way. Ashley used to light up when he walked into a room. She used to steal his hoodies and leave little notes in his lunch bag. She used to look at him like he was the answer to every question she'd never known to ask. Now she looked at him like he was a stranger interrupting her real life. "I'll be in the garage," Blake said, working on the Mustang. Ashley nodded without really hearing him, already lost in whatever private world she'd constructed without him. Blake's 1967 Mustang sat under a dust cover in the garage, a project he'd started 2 years ago and never finished. Tonight, like most nights, he wouldn't actually work on it. Instead, he'd think, plan, try to figure out when exactly his marriage had begun its quiet death. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through recent calls. Ashley's patterns had shifted dramatically. Late meetings that ran until 11. Weekend book clubs that lasted 8 hours. Shopping trips with friends he'd never met. Blake had run surveillance operations across 3 continents. He knew the signs of someone living a double life. The question wasn't whether Ashley was betraying him. It was how long it had been going on, and with whom. His phone rang. The caller ID showed his father-in-law's name, Robert Henley. "Blake, son, how are you holding up?" The phrasing struck Blake as odd. "Holding up with what, Bob?" A pause. "Oh, just, work stress. Ashley mentioned you've been putting in long hours." Blake hadn't worked late in weeks. His firm practically ran itself now, generating steady income from corporate security contracts and background investigations. Another lie from Ashley. "I'm doing fine, Bob. Everything okay with you and Linda?" Course. "Listen, Linda and I were thinking, why don't you and Ashley come out to the lake house this Sunday? Make a day of it. Take the boat out." Blake's grip tightened on the phone. The lake house. Ashley had been pushing for them to visit for weeks, which was strange because she usually avoided her parents' property. So it was too isolated, too boring. "That sounds great, Bob. I'll check with Ashley." Already did. She's excited about it. Said she could use some time on the water. After Bob hung up, Blake sat in the dim garage, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place in his mind. Ashley pushing for the lake house. Her father calling to confirm plans Ashley had apparently already made. The strange phrasing about holding up. Blake walked back into the house and found Ashley loading the dishwasher, humming softly to herself. She looked more relaxed than she had in months. "Your dad called," Blake said. "About Sunday." Ashley's hands stilled on a dinner plate. "Oh, good. I was hoping he'd remember to invite you." Another lie. Bob had made it clear Ashley had already discussed it with him. "Should be fun," Blake said. "When's the last time we went boating together?" "Too long." Ashley's smile seemed genuine for the first time in months. "It'll be like old times." Blake nodded and headed upstairs, leaving Ashley to her contentment. In his bedroom, he opened his laptop and began typing notes. Dates, times, conversations. The methodical documentation that had served him well in the field. Whatever was happening with his wife, whatever game was being played, Blake intended to be prepared. He'd spent his career staying 3 steps ahead of people who wanted to hurt him. He'd never imagined he'd need those skills at home. Chapter 2. Unraveling Threads. Blake's private investigation into his own life began at dawn on Tuesday. While Ashley slept, he installed a small GPS tracker under her car, the same type his firm used for corporate surveillance. If she was going somewhere she claimed not to be, he'd know. The tracker's data told a story Ashley's words never could. Tuesday afternoon, while supposedly at her yoga class, Ashley's car spent 3 hours parked outside Riverside Park's secluded picnic area. Thursday, during her book club meeting, the car sat in the parking lot of the Cedar Grove Motel for 4 hours. Blake knew the Cedar Grove. It was the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be seen. Cash only, no questions asked, rooms by the hour. On Friday, Blake called in a favor from his old Army buddy, Marcus Webb, who now worked private security in Chicago. Within hours, Marcus had pulled the Cedar Grove's guest records for the past 3 months. The same name appeared every Thursday. Derek Clayton, paid in cash, always requesting room 247. Derek Clayton. Blake ran the name through his professional databases. 34 years old, unmarried, worked as a personal trainer at Elite Fitness, the same gym where Ashley had started going 6 months ago. Blake remembered her sudden enthusiasm for working out, how she'd come home glowing and energetic after her sessions. Saturday morning, Blake drove to Elite Fitness and observed from across the street. At 10:15 a.m., Ashley's car pulled into the parking lot. At 10:17, she walked out of the gym with a tall man with dark hair and an easy smile. Derek Clayton. Blake watched them get into Derek's truck, a lifted Ford F-150 with custom rims and a sound system that probably cost more than most people's rent. They drove to a coffee shop downtown, where they sat at a corner table, Ashley's hand covering Derek's across the small surface. The conversation looked intimate. Ashley threw her head back and laughed at something Derek said, her face animated in a way Blake hadn't seen in months. When Derek reached over to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, Ashley leaned into the touch like a cat seeking warmth. Blake's hands clenched around his steering wheel. He'd seen enemy combatants, witnessed brutal interrogations, watched good men die in foreign deserts. But nothing had prepared him for the sight of his wife looking at another man the way she used to look at him. After an hour, they returned to Derek's truck. Blake followed at a distance as they drove to a residential area he didn't recognize. Derek's apartment was in a complex called Sunset Gardens. Ironic, given that it faced east and had all the charm of a storage facility. Blake parked where he could see Derek's front door and settled in to wait. His phone rang. Ashley. "Hi. Honey." Her voice was bright, cheerful. "I'm going to grab lunch with some of the girls after my workout. Probably won't be home until later this afternoon." Through Derek's living room window, Blake could see 2 figures moving together in what was clearly an embrace. "Have fun," Blake said, his voice steady. "Love you." "Love you too." The words felt like ashes in his mouth. Blake hung up and continued watching. At 2:30 p.m., Ashley emerged from Derek's apartment, her hair mussed, clothes slightly wrinkled. She looked around nervously before hurrying to her car. Blake let her get a 5-minute head start before following her home. By the time he arrived, Ashley was in the shower. She sang while she washed, something she hadn't done in their house for months. That evening, over takeout Chinese food, Ashley was more talkative than she'd been in weeks. She asked about his work, laughed at his stories, even suggested they plan a vacation together. "Where would you like to go?" Blake asked, studying her face. "Somewhere tropical. Maybe the Caribbean?" Ashley twirled lo mein around her chopsticks. "Somewhere we can just be together. You know." Blake nodded. "That sounds perfect." Later, as Ashley slept beside him, Blake stared at the ceiling and processed what he knew. His wife was having an affair with her personal trainer. The relationship had been going on for at least 3 months, possibly longer. She was planning something for Sunday at the lake house, something that required her father's cooperation. Blake's military training had taught him to consider all possibilities, even the ones that seemed impossible. The phrase Bob had used on the phone echoed in Blake's mind. "How are you holding up?" Like Blake was already suffering from something. Like he was a victim who just didn't know it yet. Blake turned to look at Ashley's sleeping profile. In the moonlight, she looked peaceful, almost angelic. It was hard to reconcile this image with the woman who spent Thursday afternoons in a cheap motel room. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your wife doesn't deserve you. Meet me at Mulligan's Bar tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Come alone. A friend." Blake deleted the text and set his phone aside. Someone else knew about Ashley's affair. Someone who wanted to meet him. The web of deception was larger than he'd realized. Sunday was 2 days away. Whatever Ashley and her family had planned, Blake would be ready for it. He'd spent his career staying alive by being more prepared than his enemies. The difference was, this time, his enemies lived in his own house. Chapter 3. The Setup. Blake arrived at Mulligan's Bar 15 minutes early, choosing a corner booth with clear sight lines to all entrances. Old habits from a dangerous life in foreign countries had followed him into civilian suburbia. At exactly 8 p.m., a woman approached his table. Mid-30s, auburn hair, wearing jeans and a leather jacket. She moved with the confident stride of someone comfortable in rough environments. Blake Garrison? She didn't wait for confirmation before sliding into the booth across from him. "I'm Tracy Mullins. I work at Elite Fitness." Blake studied her face. Tracy had honest eyes and calloused hands. The kind of person who'd earned everything she had. "You sent the text." "I did." Tracy signaled the bartender for a beer. "I've been watching Derek Clayton for months. Your wife isn't his first married client, if you know what I mean." "Why tell me?" Tracy's beer arrived, and she took a long pull before answering. "Because Derek's planning something big. And because you seem like a decent guy who doesn't deserve what's coming." Blake leaned forward. "What's coming?" "Derek's been bragging to his buddies about landing a rich married woman. Says she's going to leave her husband soon, and they'll have plenty of money to start over together." Tracy's expression hardened. "But here's the thing. Derek doesn't just want your wife. He wants your money. All of it." "Ow!" Tracy pulled out her phone and showed Blake a series of text screenshots. "Derek's been messaging with your father-in-law. Planning something for this Sunday at the lake house." Blake's blood chilled as he read the messages. "Derek, everything's set for Sunday?" "Bob, Blake won't suspect anything. Ashley's playing her part perfectly." "Derek, good. Once he's gone, she inherits everything. We could be together." "Bob, just make sure it looks accidental. I don't want Linda suspecting." More messages revealed the scope of the plan. Ashley would inherit Blake's life insurance policy, $2 million, plus his business assets and property. Derek had researched Blake's swimming abilities and discovered he'd never learned. The lake house was isolated, no neighbors for miles. "They're going to kill me," Blake said quietly. "That's the plan." Tracy's voice was grim. "Throw you overboard. Claim it was an accident." "Derek knows you can't swim," Ashley told him. Blake set the phone down, his mind racing through implications. This wasn't just an affair. It was premeditated murder, with his wife as the primary conspirator. "Why help me?" Blake asked. Tracy's jaw tightened. "Derek's ex-girlfriend was a friend of mine, Carla Martinez. She accidentally drowned in a swimming pool last year. Derek was the only witness. Said she'd been drinking, slipped, and hit her head. And you think? I think Derek Clayton has done this before. I think he finds married women with money, seduces them, then eliminates the husbands. Carla's husband had a big life insurance policy too." Blake absorbed this information. Derek wasn't just his wife's lover. He was a serial killer who specialized in making murder look accidental. "Have you gone to the police?" "With what?" text messages, and suspicions. Tracy shook her head. Derek's smart. He covers his tracks. But you're different, Blake. You have military training. You can fight back. Blake nodded slowly. What do you know about Sunday's plan? Tracy showed him more messages. They're planning to take you out on the boat around noon. Bob will suggest you go swimming to cool off. When you say you can't swim, they'll playfully push you overboard. Ashley will scream for help, but by the time anyone comes to your rescue, you'll have drowned. And then, Ashley plays the grieving widow. Derek comforts her through her loss. They wait a respectable amount of time, maybe 6 months, then get married. They live happily ever after on your money. Blake finished his beer, his mind already shifting into tactical mode. I need to see Derek's apartment. Why? Because I'm going to turn their plan against them. Blake's voice was cold, controlled. They want to kill me Sunday? Fine. But they're going to discover that Blake Garrison doesn't die easily. Tracy studied his face. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Derek Clayton picked the wrong mark. I've survived Taliban ambushes, IED explosions, and assassination attempts. Some gym rat who preys on married women doesn't scare me. Blake pulled out his wallet and left money for their drinks. Can you get me into Derek's apartment? I clean the gym after hours. I have access to employee records, including addresses and keys. Tracy paused. This is dangerous, Blake. If they suspect you know, they won't. Blake stood up. I've been pretending everything's normal for days. I can do it for 2 more. As they left Mulligan's, Tracy grabbed Blake's arm. Be careful. Derek's stronger than he looks. And your wife, she's not the woman you married anymore. She's willing to watch you die for money. Blake nodded. He'd already accepted that the Ashley he'd loved was gone, replaced by someone he didn't recognize. What Tracy didn't understand was that Blake Garrison had disappeared too, replaced by someone much more dangerous. Someone who'd spent 2 decades learning how to eliminate threats. Someone who never forgot a betrayal and never left a debt unpaid. Chapter 4. Into the Deep. Sunday morning arrived with deceptive beauty. Clear skies, gentle breeze, perfect weather for a day on the lake. Blake loaded their cooler into Ashley's car, playing the role of excited husband while his mind ran through contingency plans. Ashley chattered nervously during the drive to her parents' lake house, her voice pitched higher than usual. She wore a new sundress Blake had never seen, her hair styled in loose waves that caught the sunlight through the car windows. I'm so glad we're doing this, Ashley said, her hand resting on Blake's thigh. It feels like we haven't had quality time together in forever. Blake covered her hand with his. I miss this too. The lie came easily. Blake had learned to compartmentalize emotions during his military service, to function effectively even when everything around him was falling apart. Today, that training would keep him alive. Bob Henley's lake house sat on a secluded inlet, surrounded by towering pine trees. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away. Perfect isolation for what they had planned. Bob greeted them at the dock, his weathered face creased with what Blake now recognized as forced joviality. There's my son-in-law. Ready for some fishing? Looking forward to it, Blake replied, noting how Bob's eyes kept darting toward the tree line. Linda Henley emerged from the house, carrying a picnic basket, her movements stiff with nervous energy. I packed sandwiches and that pasta salad you like, Blake. The normalcy of the scene was surreal. 3 people planning his murder were treating him like beloved family. Blake wondered how long they'd been capable of this level of deception. Where's Derek? Ashley asked, checking her phone. Bob's expression flickered. Derek, my trainer. You said I could invite him, remember? He loves boating. Blake watched this exchange with professional interest. Ashley was improvising, creating plausible reasons for Derek's presence. She was better at this than he'd given her credit for. All right, Derek, you should be here any minute. Derek's truck rumbled up the gravel drive at exactly noon. He emerged wearing board shorts and a tank top that showcased his muscular physique. Blake had to admit the man was impressive physically, probably 6'2", lean but powerful, with the kind of build that came from years of serious training. Derek, Ashley's face lit up with genuine happiness for the first time in months. I'm so glad you could make it. Derek's greeting to Ashley was carefully platonic. A brief hug, friendly smile. To anyone watching, they were just trainer and client enjoying a social outing. Blake, right? Derek extended his hand. Ashley's told me so much about you. Blake shook the hand that would push him to his death in a few hours. Derek's grip was firm, confident. The grip of someone who'd never lost a physical confrontation. All good things, I hope, Blake replied. They loaded into Bob's fishing boat, a 24-foot Grady White with twin outboards. Blake made note of the safety equipment: life jackets in a stern compartment, emergency radio, flare gun. Standard precautions that wouldn't help him if they were part of the plan to eliminate him. Bob piloted them to the middle of the lake, where the water was nearly 100 feet deep. Dark blue and cold, even in summer. Blake estimated the water temperature at around 65 degrees, cold enough to incapacitate someone quickly, especially someone who couldn't swim. "This looks like a perfect spot," Ashley said, her voice carrying a strange undertone. They spent an hour fishing, the conversation forced and artificial. Blake caught 2 bass, while Derek caught nothing, which seemed to irritate the younger man. Blake filed away this information. Derek had a competitive streak and didn't handle losing well. "Anyone else getting hot?" Bob asked, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cool breeze. "That sun's really beating down." Right on cue, Blake thought. "Maybe we should take a swim," Ashley suggested. "Cool off a bit." "Great idea," Derek agreed immediately. "Blake, you coming in?" Blake shook his head. "I never learned to swim properly. I'll just watch." This was their moment. Blake tensed, ready for the attack he knew was coming. "Come on," Derek said, standing up. "It's not that deep here. We'll stay close to the boat." Blake remained seated. "I'm good, thanks." Derek and Ashley exchanged a glance. Bob moved closer, ostensibly to help with the anchor. "Don't be a baby," Ashley said, her voice carrying a sharp edge Blake had never heard before. "Live a little." Derek grabbed Blake's arm. "Come on, man. It'll be fun." Blake allowed himself to be pulled to his feet, playing the reluctant participant. This was it, the moment they would push him overboard. But Blake had spent Friday night in Derek's apartment, courtesy of Tracy's key. He'd learned several interesting facts about Derek Clayton that changed everything. "All right," Blake said, moving toward the boat's edge. "But if I drown, it's your fault." Ashley laughed, a sound Blake would remember for the rest of his life. "Don't worry, honey. We'll take good care of you." Derek positioned himself behind Blake, hands on his shoulders. Bob moved to help. Ashley watched with anticipation. "On 3, Derek said. 1, 2. But Blake was no longer the man they thought they were killing. He was the soldier who'd survived ambushes in Afghanistan, the intelligence operative who'd eliminated high-value targets across 3 continents. As Derek and Bob moved to push him, Blake spun around with combat-trained speed and precision, grabbing Derek's wrist and using the younger man's momentum against him. Derek's eyes widened in shock as he found himself flying through the air toward the dark water. The splash echoed across the lake as Derek Clayton, who, Blake had discovered, couldn't swim despite his athletic prowess, hit the water and immediately began to panic. "Help!" Derek thrashed desperately, his head going under. "I can't," Ashley screamed, but not for the reason she'd planned. Bob lunged toward Blake, but Blake had already moved, his military training taking over. The fight for survival had begun, and Blake Garrison intended to be the only one who walked away from it. Chapter 5, The Reckoning. Derek's panicked thrashing in the dark water below created chaos on the boat. Ashley screamed his name, reaching toward the lake as if she could somehow pull him to safety from 15 feet away. Bob abandoned his attack on Blake and dove for the life preserver. Blake watched Derek's desperate struggle with cold calculation. The man who'd planned to watch him drown was discovering what that terror felt like firsthand. "Throw him the life ring," Ashley shouted at Blake, her composure completely shattered. Blake picked up the orange flotation device and held it calmly. "Why would I do that?" Ashley's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "Derek's drowning. Derek's getting exactly what he planned to give me." Blake's voice carried no emotion. "The only difference is he actually can't swim." Bob had stopped reaching for the life preserver and was staring at Blake with dawning horror. I know everything, Bob. I know about the plan to push me overboard." I know about Derek and Ashley's affair. I know about the life insurance money. Blake set the life ring down, just out of Bob's reach. I even know this isn't Derek's first time killing a husband for money. Derek's head went under again, his movements becoming more erratic. Ashley was sobbing now, begging Blake to save her lover. "Please," she whispered. "I'll explain everything. Just save him." Blake looked at his wife, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. "Explain what, Ashley? How you've been planning my murder for months. How you and Derek used my father-in-law to set up the perfect killing ground." "It wasn't supposed to happen like this," Bob said, his voice shaking. "How was it supposed to happen?" Blake's tone remained conversational, as if they were discussing weekend plans instead of murder. Derek's struggles were weakening. The cold water was sapping his strength, and panic was making him waste energy. He had maybe 2 minutes before he went under for good. "Derek said you were hurting Ashley," Bob stammered. "He said you were abusive, that she was afraid to leave you." Blake almost laughed. "And you believe that? He showed me bruises." "Make up, Bob. Or maybe Derek put them there himself. You've been played by a professional killer who's done this before." Ashley had stopped begging and was now staring at Blake with naked hatred. "You bastard. You're just going to let him die. The same way you were going to let me die." Blake picked up Derek's gym bag and pulled out a waterproof pouch. Inside were Derek's phone and car keys. Except Derek made a mistake. He kept souvenirs. Blake showed them Derek's phone, open to a photo gallery that told a horrible story. Pictures of Carla Martinez, Derek's previous victim. Photos of her husband before his convenient death. Screenshots of insurance payouts and bank transfers. "Derek Clayton is a serial killer," Blake said as Derek's head disappeared beneath the surface again. "He's done this at least 3 times that I can prove. You helped a monster plan my murder, Ashley." The fight went out of Ashley all at once. She collapsed onto the boat's bench seat, staring at the water where Derek had been. "I didn't know," she whispered. "You knew enough." Blake pocketed Derek's phone. "You knew you were planning to watch your husband drown for money." Derek surfaced one more time, his face gray with exhaustion and hypothermia. His eyes met Blake's across the water, and Blake saw recognition there, the understanding that he'd been outmaneuvered by someone better at this game. Derek's mouth opened to say something, but only lake water came out. He slipped beneath the surface and didn't come back up. The lake fell silent except for Ashley's quiet sobbing. "What happens now?" Bob asked, his voice hollow. Blake started the boat's engine. "Now we go back to shore. You'll tell the police that Derek Clayton couldn't swim and jumped in anyway. Tragic accident. Ashley was too distraught to think clearly, and you were too slow with a life preserver. They'll investigate. Let them." Blake turned the boat toward shore. "Derek's phone has enough evidence to prove he was a serial killer. His apartment has trophies from previous victims. When the police dig into his background, they'll find a pattern of mysterious drownings connected to life insurance payouts." As the boat cut through the water, Blake continued. "Derek Clayton made 2 mistakes. First, he picked someone with military training. Second, he kept evidence of his previous crimes because he was proud of what he'd done." Ashley looked up at Blake with red-rimmed eyes. "What about us?" Blake met her gaze without flinching. "There's no us anymore, Ashley. You're going to divorce me quietly, take whatever settlement I offer, and disappear from my life forever. And if I don't," Blake's expression went completely cold, "then I'll make sure the police know you were Derek's accomplice in planning my murder. With Derek's phone records and the evidence in his apartment, I think a jury would be very interested to hear about your role in this conspiracy." The lake house came into view, its peaceful exterior hiding the violence that had just occurred. Linda Henley stood on the dock, waving cheerfully at their return. Blake wondered how he would explain to her that her husband had helped plan a murder, or if he would explain it all. Some truths were too large for people to carry. As they tied up at the dock, Blake realized he felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret, no grief for his marriage or the man who died in the lake. He'd eliminated a threat and survived an attempt on his life. Everything else was just details to be managed. Derek Clayton had wanted to destroy Blake Garrison and take his life. Instead, he discovered that some men were too dangerous to hunt. The reckoning was complete. But Blake's revenge was just beginning. Chapter 6, The Aftermath. The police arrived within an hour of their return to shore. Detective Sarah Walsh, a tired-looking woman in her 40s, took statements from everyone while the dive team searched for Derek's body. Blake played his role perfectly, the grieving friend who'd watched helplessly as Derek drowned. He showed appropriate shock, answered questions with just the right mixture of confusion and distress. You didn't think to throw him the life preserver immediately? Detective Walsh asked. I'm not a strong swimmer myself, Blake replied. I guess I panicked. Bob was trying to help, but Derek went under so fast. Ashley sat wrapped in a blanket, saying almost nothing. Her shock appeared genuine, which helped sell the accidental death story. Bob stammered through his statement, his guilt making him seem authentically traumatized. This Derek Clayton, Detective Walsh said, consulting her notes. He was your wife's personal trainer, right? He seemed like a nice guy, athletic outdoorsy type. I had no idea he couldn't swim. Blake's performance was flawless. Years of intelligence work had taught him to lie convincingly under pressure. The detective found nothing suspicious in his account. Derek's body was recovered 3 hours later from the lake bottom. The preliminary examination showed no signs of trauma, just the bloated features of a drowning victim. Tragic accident, Detective Walsh told them. Happens more often than people think. Strong swimmers get overconfident, panic when they realize they're in trouble. Blake nodded sadly. Derek seemed so capable. It's hard to believe. As the police wrapped up their investigation, Blake found himself alone with Bob Henley near the dock. Linda was inside, comforting Ashley, and the other officers were packing their equipment. You killed him, Bob whispered. Blake looked out at the peaceful lake. Derek drowned because he couldn't swim and jumped into deep water anyway. That's what the official report will say. You knew he couldn't swim. The same way you knew I couldn't swim when you planned to push me overboard. Blake's voice was calm, reasonable. The difference is Derek chose to jump. I would have been murdered. Bob's hands shook as he lit a cigarette. What do you want from me? Your silence. Forever. Blake turned to face his father-in-law. You're going to live with what you almost did. Every time you look at Linda, you'll remember that you were willing to help kill your daughter's husband for money. Ashley said you were hurting her. Ashley lied to you the same way she lied to me. The same way Derek lied to both of us. Blake's expression hardened, but you still chose to believe that murder was the solution. That makes you guilty, Bob. Bob took a shaky drag from his cigarette. So what happens now? Now you live with the consequences of your choices. You don't get forgiveness. You don't get absolution. You get to carry this guilt until the day you die. Blake walked away, leaving Bob standing alone by the water where his co-conspirator had drowned. The drive home was silent. Ashley stared out the passenger window while Blake navigated the winding mountain roads. Neither of them spoke until they pulled into their driveway. I never meant for anyone to get hurt, Ashley said quietly. Blake turned off the engine and looked at her. Yes, you did. You meant for me to get hurt. You meant for me to die. Tears ran down Ashley's cheeks. I was confused. Derek made me think. Derek didn't make you do anything. You chose to have an affair. You chose to plan my murder. You chose money over the man who'd loved you for 12 years. Blake's voice carried no anger, just cold finality. Those were your decisions, Ashley. Inside their house, Blake poured himself a scotch and sat in his favorite chair. Ashley hovered in the doorway, uncertain. What happens to us? She asked. I already told you. Divorce. You take what I'm willing to give you and start over somewhere else. Blake, please. Can't we try to work through this? Blake looked at the woman who'd promised to love and honor him, who'd stood beside him at their wedding altar and vowed to forsake all others. The woman who'd spent months planning his death. Ashley, do you understand what you've done? You didn't just cheat on me. You didn't just plan to leave me. You planned to have me murdered. I thought I loved him. You love the idea of $2 million in life insurance money. Blake took a sip of scotch. Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, you're going to pack whatever fits in 2 suitcases. You're going to sign whatever divorce papers my lawyer gives you. And then you're going to disappear from my life forever. Ashley's face crumpled. You can't just throw away 12 years of marriage. You already did that when you decided I was worth more dead than alive. Blake stood up and walked to his office, leaving Ashley crying in the living room. He had work to do. Derek's phone contained evidence of multiple murders that needed to be turned over to the proper authorities, but carefully, anonymously, so that his own involvement remained hidden. As Blake began copying files from Derek's phone, he reflected on the day's events. Derek Clayton was dead. His serial killing spree ended. Ashley's betrayal was exposed. Their marriage finished. Bob Henley would live with the guilt of attempted murder for the rest of his life. Justice had been served, but Blake felt no satisfaction, just the cold emptiness that came after eliminating a threat. The same feeling he'd carried home from too many missions overseas. Blake Garrison had survived another attempt on his life. But the man who'd loved Ashley, who'd believed in their marriage, who'd trusted his family, that man had died in the lake along with Derek Clayton. What remained was something harder and more dangerous. Something that would never again make the mistake of trusting the wrong people. The reckoning was complete, but Blake's new life was just beginning. Chapter 7: Unraveling Threads. 3 weeks after Derek's death, Blake sat in his lawyer's office watching Ashley sign the divorce papers. Her hand trembled as she wrote her name, but her face remained composed. She'd learned to hide her emotions, though Blake wondered if she had any left. "The settlement is generous," Mrs. Garrison, attorney Michael Ross said. "More than you'd likely receive in court." Ashley looked up at Blake. Why? Blake had wondered the same thing. Why give her anything at all? She'd try to have him killed. By rights, she should get nothing. "Because I want you gone," Blake said simply. "The money ensures you'll leave and never come back." The settlement was $200,000, enough to start over somewhere else, not enough to live lavishly. Ashley would have to work, have to build a new life from scratch. It seemed appropriate. After Ashley left with her check and her 2 suitcases, Michael Ross poured 2 glasses of bourbon. "You know, she could have gotten much more if she'd fought the divorce," Ross said. "She couldn't fight it. Not without risking a murder conspiracy charge." Ross nodded. As Blake's lawyer for 8 years, he knew better than to ask too many questions about his client's methods. "What's next for you?" Blake considered the question. His marriage was over. His would-be killers were dead or neutralized. His business was thriving. He should have felt free, victorious even. Instead, he felt hollow. "I'm thinking about selling the security firm," Blake said. "Maybe travel for a while." "Running away?" Blake smiled grimly. "Expanding my horizons." That afternoon, Blake drove to Elite Fitness to meet Tracy Mullins. She was waiting for him in the parking lot, her expression unreadable. "I heard about the divorce," she said. "Word travels fast. Small town. People talk." Tracy studied his face. "How are you holding up?" Blake shrugged. "I'm alive. Derek isn't. Ashley's gone. The math works out in my favor." "That's not what I meant." They walked to a nearby coffee shop and found a quiet corner table. Tracy ordered a latte while Blake stuck with black coffee. "Simple, no complications." "I've been thinking about what you said," Tracy began. "About Derek being a serial killer. The police found evidence in his apartment. 3 different victims over 5 years, all married men with large life insurance policies. Derek had a very specific type." Tracy wrapped her fingers around her coffee cup. "Including you. Including me. But I wasn't as easy to kill as he expected. Because you're a dangerous man, Blake Garrison." Blake met her eyes. "Is that a problem?" "That depends. Are you planning to hurt more people?" Blake considered the question seriously. "I don't hurt innocent people, Tracy. I never have. But I don't forgive betrayal, and I don't leave threats alive to hurt me again." "What about justice? Law and order?" "The law didn't protect me from Derek. It wouldn't have stopped him from killing again. Sometimes justice has to be personal." Tracy was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. "There's something else. About Derek's past." Blake leaned forward. "What?" "I did some digging after he died. Derek Clayton wasn't his real name. It was Derek Chavez. He grew up in Phoenix, got arrested twice for assault, once for attempted rape. The charges never stuck because the victims were too scared to testify. How did he end up here? Reinvented himself. New name, new backstory, fake references. The gym owner never did a proper background check." Tracy pulled out a folder. "But here's the interesting part. Derek had a partner." Blake's attention sharpened. "What kind of partner?" Someone who helped him research targets, plan the murders. I found encrypted emails on his laptop before the police confiscated it. Tracy slid a printout across the table. Someone with the initials RC. Blake scanned the emails. They detailed Derek's entire operation. How to identify wealthy married women. How to seduce them. How to plan the husband's accidental death. The partner provided background research, financial information, even helped create alibis. RC knew about me, Blake said, reading further. They knew about my military background, my security firm, my insurance policies. More than that, RC warned Derek that you might be dangerous. Suggested they be extra careful with the lake house plan. Blake felt a chill run down his spine. Derek hadn't been working alone. Someone else had been pulling the strings, someone who was still out there. The police didn't find these emails. I copied them before turning in the laptop. Figured you should see them first. Tracy's expression was grim. Blake, whoever RC is, they're still operating. And they know you killed their partner. Blake studied the emails again, his mind racing through implications. Derek's death hadn't ended the threat. It had merely eliminated one part of a larger conspiracy. Any idea who RC might be? I have some theories. But Blake. Tracy reached across the table and touched his hand. This person helped plan your murder. They're not going to just disappear because Derek's dead. Blake nodded slowly. He'd thought his revenge was complete, his enemies eliminated. But Derek Clayton had been just the tip of the iceberg. Somewhere out there, RC was planning their next move. What do you want me to do with this information? Blake asked. Tracy's smile was sharp, predatory. I wanted to find RC and make sure they can never hurt anyone else. Blake looked at the woman across from him, really looked at her. Tracy Mullins wasn't just a concerned gym employee trying to help. She was something more dangerous. Who are you really, Tracy? Someone who's been hunting Derek Clayton for a lot longer than you have. Someone who lost people to his operation. Tracy's eyes hardened. Someone who wants to see justice done, even if it has to be the kind that never sees a courtroom. Blake felt something shift inside him, a recognition of kindred spirit. Tracy Mullins was like him, someone who'd been shaped by violence, who understood that sometimes the system failed and individuals had to act. Partners? Blake asked. Tracy's smile was cold as winter. Partners. As they shook hands, Blake realized his revenge wasn't over. It was evolving, expanding into something larger and more dangerous. Derek Clayton was dead, but his network remained. And Blake Garrison intended to dismantle it piece by piece, starting with the mysterious RC. The hunt was just beginning. Chapter 8. The Network. Blake's investigation into Derek's network led him down a rabbit hole of false identities, shell companies, and carefully orchestrated murders spanning 7 states. Working with Tracy, he began to understand the scope of what they were dealing with. It's not just random killings, Tracy explained, spreading surveillance photos across Blake's dining room table. It's a business. Derek was just one operative in a larger organization. The evidence was damning. Bank records showed payments flowing from a company called Riverside Consulting to Derek and at least 3 other individuals. Life insurance payouts totaling over $15 million in the past decade, all connected to mysterious accidents involving wealthy married men. Riverside Consulting, Blake mused, studying the corporate filings. Registered in Delaware, owned by a trust, managed by Robert Chun. Tracy finished. Our mysterious RC. Blake's blood went cold. He knew that name, but not from the investigation. Robert Chun was a client of his security firm, had been for 3 years. A wealthy businessman who'd hired Blake's company to investigate potential threats to his various enterprises. Son of a bitch, Blake whispered. You know him? Blake nodded grimly. He's been paying me to investigate people for years. Business partners, competitors, anyone he considered a threat. Blake's mind raced through implications. I've been doing reconnaissance for a murder network without knowing it. Tracy's expression sharpened. What kind of information did you give him? Background checks, financial records, family information, security assessments. Blake felt sick as the realization hit him. Everything Derek would need to plan a murder. Blake pulled out his laptop and accessed his firm's client database. Robert Chin's file was extensive, dozens of investigations over 3 years, all targeting wealthy married men with substantial assets. "Look at this," Blake said, pointing to the screen. "Every man I investigated for Chun ended up dead within 6 months. Drowning accidents, hunting mishaps, car crashes. All ruled accidental." "How many?" Blake counted the files. 18. Maybe more if we go back further. The scope of the operation was staggering. Robert Chun had been using Blake's security firm to identify and research targets, then dispatching operatives like Derek to seduce the wives and eliminate the husbands. Blake had been an unwitting accomplice in mass murder. "Where is Chun now?" Tracy asked. Blake checked his files. Last known address is a penthouse in Chicago, but he travels constantly. His home's in Miami, Los Angeles, and Phoenix. Tracy stood up and walked to the window, her reflection ghost-like in the dark glass. "This is bigger than we thought, Blake. Chun isn't just running a few isolated scams. He's built an entire network of killers." Blake closed his laptop and poured himself a scotch. "The question is, what do we do about it? We could go to the FBI. With what evidence? Everything we have was obtained illegally. Chin's smart enough to insulate himself from direct involvement. Derek's dead, so he can't testify." Blake took a drink. "The legal system won't touch him." Tracy turned from the window. "Then we handle it ourselves." Blake studied her face. "You're talking about murder. I'm talking about justice. How many more husbands have to die while Chun builds his empire?" Blake considered this. Robert Chun had used him, manipulated him into helping murder innocent men. Worse, Chun might have suspected Blake was getting too close to the truth, making him a target for elimination. "Chun knows I'm a threat now," Blake said. "Derek's death, the investigation, my divorce from Ashley. He'll connect the dots eventually. All the more reason to act first." Blake's phone rang, interrupting their planning. The caller ID showed Robert Chin's number. "Speak of the devil," Blake said, showing Tracy the screen. "Answer it," she whispered. "Act normal." Blake accepted the call. "Chin, how are you?" "Blake, my friend. I heard about your recent troubles. The drowning at the lake, your divorce. I'm very sorry." Blake forced his voice to remain steady. "Thank you. It's been a difficult time. I can imagine. Listen, I have a proposition that might help take your mind off things. A new project that requires your particular skills." "What kind of project?" "There's a businessman in Seattle I need investigated. Marcus Webb. He's been making some threats against my interests, and I need to know if he's serious about following through." Blake's blood turned to ice. Marcus Webb, his old army buddy who'd helped him investigate Derek. Chin was targeting Marcus, probably because he'd helped Blake uncover the truth. "I'll need the usual background information," Blake said carefully. "Of course. I'll send over the files tonight. This one is priority, Blake. I need the report within a week." After Chin hung up, Blake stared at his phone in horror. "He's going after Marcus." "Your army friend?" "The one who helped me research Derek. Chin knows Marcus was involved in the investigation." Blake stood up, his mind racing. "I have to warn him." Tracy grabbed his arm. "Wait. Think about this strategically. If you warn Marcus, Chin will know you're onto him. He'll disappear, and we'll never get another chance at him. So I just let my friend die? No. We use this as an opportunity." Tracy's eyes gleamed with predatory intelligence. "Chin's given us a way to get close to him. You deliver the report on Marcus, meet with Chun in person, and then we end this." Blake understood what she was suggesting. Use Marcus as bait to lure Chun into the open, then eliminate him before he could hurt anyone else. Marcus is a good man. He doesn't deserve to be caught up in this. Neither did any of the other 18 victims. Sometimes good people get hurt when we're fighting monsters. Blake walked to his window and looked out at the quiet suburban street. Somewhere out there, Robert Chun was planning to expand his network of killers. More husbands would die. More families would be destroyed. Also, Chun could profit from carefully orchestrated murder. The legal system couldn't touch him. The police couldn't stop him. But Blake Garrison could. "All right," Blake said finally. "We do this. But we do it my way." Tracy smiled, and Blake saw something predatory in her expression. "What's your way?" "We don't just kill Chun. We destroy his entire network. Every operative, every financial backer, every person who's profited from murder. Blake's voice was cold as winter. When we're done, there won't be enough left of his organization to hurt a fly. Tracy nodded approvingly. Now you're thinking like a soldier. Blake realized she was right. For too long, he'd been reacting to threats instead of eliminating them, playing defense instead of offense. That ended now. Robert Chun had made the mistake of targeting Blake's friends. Now he would discover that some enemies were too dangerous to make. The war was about to begin. Chapter 9, Endgame. Blake's plan was elegant in its simplicity. He would deliver Robert Chun exactly what he wanted: detailed intelligence on Marcus Webb, complete with security assessments and vulnerability analyses. But the meeting to hand over the report would be Chen's last. Tracy had spent 2 weeks infiltrating Chen's organization, using skills Blake suspected came from intelligence training she'd never mentioned. She'd identified Chen's Chicago penthouse, his security detail, his routines and habits. He's paranoid but predictable, Tracy reported. Meets new clients in his penthouse office, always at 3 p.m. on Thursdays. Security stays outside during business meetings. Blake reviewed the building schematics Tracy had obtained. What about escape routes? 2 elevators, 1 stairwell, private helipad on the roof. But Blake, Tracy's expression was troubled. Chen's not stupid. He might suspect this is a trap. Let him suspect. By the time he figures it out, it'll be too late. Blake had called Marcus and told him to disappear for a few weeks. Take a vacation, visit family, anything to get out of Seattle until this was over. Marcus had asked questions, but Blake's tone had convinced him not to argue. Thursday afternoon, Blake entered the gleaming downtown tower that housed Chen's penthouse. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor gave him time to center himself, to become the killer he'd been trained to be instead of the businessman he'd pretended to become. Chen's office was understated elegance, floor-to-ceiling windows, expensive art, furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Chen himself was a small, neat man in his 50s, wearing a tailored suit and an expression of mild curiosity. "Blake, good to see you." Chen gestured to a chair across from his desk. "You look well, considering everything you've been through." Blake sat down and placed a manila folder on the desk. "The Marcus Webb report. Everything you requested." Chen opened the folder and scanned the contents. Detailed background information, financial records, security assessments. All of it accurate, all of it professionally prepared. "Excellent work as always." Chen closed the folder. "Tell me, Blake, what's your assessment of Mr. Webb as a potential threat?" Blake kept his expression neutral. "Minimal threat capability. No military training, no security background. Runs a small private investigation firm, mostly insurance fraud cases. He'd be easy to handle if you decided to take action." Chen nodded approvingly. "And his family? Wife, children?" "Divorced, no kids. Lives alone in a condo downtown. Very isolated, socially speaking." "Perfect." Chen leaned back in his chair. "You've made this very easy, Blake." "Made what easy?" Chen's smile was cold. "Come now, Blake. Did you really think I wouldn't figure out what happened at the lake? Derek Clayton was one of my best operatives. His death wasn't the accident you made it appear to be." Blake felt the familiar calm that preceded violence. Chen knew the truth, which meant this conversation was about to become very dangerous. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do. You discovered Derek was sleeping with your wife, figured out the plan to kill you, and turn the tables. Very impressive, actually. I underestimated you." Chen opened his desk drawer and withdrew a small pistol. "The question is, what do I do with you now? You're clearly too dangerous to leave alive, but you're also too valuable to waste." Blake assessed the situation. Chen had a gun, but hadn't pointed it at him yet. The office door was 20 feet away. Chen's security detail probably just outside. Blake's own weapon, a ceramic knife that had passed through building security, was concealed in his jacket. "I have a proposition," Chen continued. "Join my organization. Use your skills for more profitable purposes than corporate security. Help me expand operations. You want me to help you murder people. I want you to help me run a business. A very lucrative business that eliminates problematic individuals while generating substantial profits." Chen's expression was earnest, as if he were offering a legitimate job opportunity. "Think about it, Blake. Your wife betrayed you. Your marriage is over, Your trust in people is shattered. Why not embrace what you really are? What am I? A killer. A very effective one, from what I can tell. Derek was no amateur, yet you eliminated him without leaving any evidence. That takes skill. Blake stood up slowly, keeping his hands visible. You're right about one thing, Chun. I am a killer. Chun raised the pistol. Sit down, Blake. But I don't kill for money. I kill threats. Blake's voice was conversational, almost friendly. And you, Robert Chun, are a threat. Blake moved faster than Chun could react, his military training taking over. The ceramic knife appeared in his hand as he dove across the desk, striking before Chun could fire. The struggle was brief and brutal. Chun was soft, unprepared for physical violence. Blake was a combat veteran who'd killed men with his bare hands in foreign countries. When it was over, Robert Chun lay dead behind his expensive desk, his blood staining the Persian rug beneath him. Blake wiped his knife clean and checked his watch. The entire encounter had taken less than 3 minutes. Chen's security team wouldn't be expecting him to leave for at least another 15 minutes. Blake picked up his report folder and walked calmly to the elevator. As the doors closed, he pressed the button for the parking garage instead of the lobby. Tracy would be waiting with a car and a clean exit route. Done, Tracy asked as Blake got into the passenger seat. Done. They drove in silence for several blocks before Tracy spoke again. What about the rest of his network? Blake pulled out Chen's phone, which he'd taken from the dead man's pocket. Chen was old-school paranoid. Kept everything on his personal device instead of trusting cloud storage or computers. The phone contained a treasure trove of information. Names, addresses, bank accounts, operational details for dozens of murders. Blake began forwarding selected files to FBI field offices across the country. Anonymous tips that would destroy Chen's network within weeks. The other operatives will be arrested or disappear once the FBI starts investigating. Either way, they're finished. Tracy smiled with satisfaction. Justice served. Blake wasn't sure if what they'd done qualified as justice, but it was certainly final. Robert Chun would never hurt another family, never order another murder, never profit from orchestrated death. 6 months later, Blake sold his security firm and bought a small ranch in Montana. The isolation suited him, and the work was honest. Raising cattle, maintaining fences, living quietly under the big sky. Tracy visited occasionally, bringing news of the outside world. Chen's network had completely collapsed under FBI investigation. Several operatives had been arrested, others had simply vanished. The surviving families of Chen's victims had received anonymous tips leading to substantial insurance settlements and criminal prosecutions. Ashley had remarried, a middle-aged accountant in Phoenix who had no idea about her past. Blake hoped she'd learned something from her experience, but he doubted it. Some people were incapable of change. Bob Henley had suffered a heart attack 3 months after Derek's death. The guilt had eaten at him until his body gave out. Blake felt no satisfaction in his father-in-law's death, just the cold recognition that actions had consequences. On quiet evenings, Blake sat on his porch and watched the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. He'd eliminated every threat to his life, avenged every betrayal, destroyed an entire network of killers. He'd won, but victory felt hollow when you had no one left to share it with. Blake Garrison had survived every enemy, overcome every obstacle, emerged triumphant from every battle. He'd also lost everything that had made life worth living. The sun set behind the mountains, and Blake went inside to his empty house, carrying the weight of perfect, terrible justice with him into the gathering darkness. Some victories came at a price too high to calculate. Some revenge cost more than the original betrayal. Blake had learned that lesson too late to matter, but he'd learned it completely. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.